firstly like to thank the TOK organizing team for giving us, two freshmen from university, the opportunity to treat such a... Is this on? Can you guys hear me in the back? Yeah, that's better. To treat such a juicy... You can't hear me in the back? Is that better? Yeah? All the way in the back? Yeah? So we would like to thank them for giving us the opportunity to treat such a juicy question. I'm Lucas Marinaga. I'm a recent alumni of this very school, and I was lucky enough to be a co-year of Lochlann. And what I'm doing right now is I'm searching, I'm learning to learn and trying to find myself at the Leiden University College of The Hague. So this is a very relevant question for me, the question of what we are.
I'm Lochlann, and I'm, as Lucas said, graduated last year. So equally as inexperienced and unwise as he is. I'm studying philosophy in the University of Edinburgh. We just thought we'd add something, and actually since the opening ceremony last night, we thought Tom Oden's speech in particular kind of encapsulated, why we should kind of bother with TOK at all, and that is with his knowledge claim. We need more uncertainty, and that reminded me of a quote I really love from Bertrand Russell. So, Lucas and I are kind of trying to compensate for our youth and inexperience by referencing Tom Oden and Russell, to people with bucket loads more of experience and wisdom than we. So, Russell talking about uncertainty as he calls it perfect assurance. He says that perfect assurance by itself is enough to destroy all mental progress in those who have it. And when it is combined with contempt for the angularities and awkwardnesses that are almost invariably combined with great mental power, it becomes a source of destruction to all who come in contact with it. So that kind of encapsulates, I guess, why we bother with questioning, because as opposed to seeing questioning as the destructive force in our lives, which is very easy to do, rather, I think Russell is right in saying is actually assurance that really is destructive.
So the question that we'll be attempting to treat today has to do with human identity, right? So what it means truly to be human. And so Lochlann and I, we're staying in the guest apartment, by the way. We'd never seen it before we came now, being speakers here. And we thought, we're never going to get a chance like this ever again to, be opening for such a conference. So we thought, why don't we take the wildest claim and then try our best to defend it in front of you guys? So in the question that we'll be answering, human identity, the focus that we'll be taking on there is not necessarily on what Lochlann and I are currently doing, like giving the speech, because I don't think that's very representative of what we normally do on a daily basis. This is what Lochlann and I look outside of the conference, right? So we'll be taking more of the focus on what we are as opposed to what we are actually doing, right? And so just to give you a brief overview of how we'll try to tackle this question, we'll firstly draw the dichotomy in between the we and the individual. So what separates the collective from the individual. Then we'll go into what separates humans from other types of organisms. And then we'll be finalizing with some pretty hard-hitting and awakening conclusions, hopefully.
So let's get right into it. So the we versus I, we should probably first establish what an individual conscious is before we start talking about more than one conscious. So we're going to kind of illustrate this with a working definition with a quick... I guess that's our speech done. So Lucas is going to introduce a little game to you guys to just illustrate what it is that makes us individuals, first of all.
Yeah, so if each of you guys could maybe pick a partner right next to you, if you can, then we'll do a little exercise, right? And what we would like you guys to do for about 17 seconds, not yet, as soon as I tell you to start, please start. Look each other in the eye and try to think of something which you are nearly sure of that your partner, who you're looking in the eye, does not know about you. So let this not be like a physical trait of yours, where you have a spot or something like that. Try to make this something substantial about your character, about your opinion, the way that you form your opinions. Look each other in the eye for about 17 seconds, think about this thing, and meanwhile try to think of the thing that they're thinking of that you can't know, right? Don't talk, by the way. You're not allowed to talk, so absolute silence from now on. 3, 2, 1. Okay, break eye contact. Now, what we're going to try to do now is each of you guys will get respectively 3 guesses, and you're going to try, like, don't make this complicated, right? Maybe 1 or 2 words, try to think of the thing that they were trying to think of that you would not know about them. So give 3 guesses to what they thought was merely personal to them, right? Starting now, we'll give you 30 seconds to do that. Okay, 10 more seconds. Five more seconds. Okay, yeah. Okay, guys. Can everyone here respectively, who got the right answer with regards to their partner? Is that it? Kind of. Is that kind of or spot on right there? Kind of, spot on the top we hear over there. Right? The point that we wanted to achieve with this exercise, right, is that the point of being an individual, in this case we're not yet getting to our other organisms, but is to have something that is specific to you, right? And we'll make an example to make this more clear. This is Rowan, and Rowan is a co-years of ours, and he's a very adamant rugby fan, and he supports Ireland, right? And when we, for example, saw Rowan watch an Ireland game and Ireland would lose, say, to Scotland, right? We would try to empathize with him, right? We would try to feel like he does. But you come to realize quite quickly that you can't really think of what it feels like for Rowan to be Rowan watching Ireland lose, right? All you can really think of is what it would be like for me as Lucas to be Rowan and then watch Ireland lose, right? You can't really immerse yourself fully in the perspective that Rowan, or your partner in this case, takes on. Now, I'm pretty surprised that you guys actually got it spot on, right? But I think that would just have to do with how close you guys are, how well you guys know each other, and less of a substantial knowledge that you have of their individualness.
Yeah, cool. So now that we've kind of established what it is to be an individual, we can move onto the we. So the kind of main focus of the speech. So Lucas and I think that a we, a we isn't just multiple individual consciousnesses in the same place, right? I think we have a visual. Yeah. So we wouldn't really call this a we by our standard, because you can imagine that they're not interacting with each other, right? You might as well, as Lucas will illustrate, you might as well just be on your own, right? Because you could be sitting there for 30 minutes just on your phone, not interacting with the 3 other people. So in essence, you could just have been sitting there on your own. So we think a necessary definition of what a we is interacting, multiple consciousnesses interacting with each other, not just being in proximity to each other. So this is a kind of perfect example of what we mean. So we have kind of examples of teamwork, the mythical rock and Russian fusion there. Just kind of fraternity and these kinds of things. You have interaction with other people's consciousnesses, and that's what makes a we.
We realize that these are funny pictures, but I think the message that we're trying to get across is quite serious with regards to interaction.
And that kind of, speaking of seriousness, we're going to bring in a German philosopher called Immanuel Kant, and kind of bring in some of his ideas and spell them out, because he has some really interesting things to say about what it is to be human. So according to Kant, he says that humans are kind of composed of roughly 2 parts. There's the animal part and the human part. And humans aren't perfectly reasonable because they have the animal part, but they're also not merely like other animals because they have the human part. They have this ability to exercise reason, which is what makes them different.
I think you need to be more specific in
okay, fair enough. So specifically, he's saying that the human's ability to use reason and reflect on the world is what makes them different. And Kant calls this the rational nature of humans, or the rational capacity, just the ability to use reason. And in his words, he says that because of this, every human being exists as an end in itself, because they have a rational nature. And more importantly, that they can use their reason to overpower their animal desires.
Yeah. I think maybe go deeper into what makes animal desires so very different that than reason, say.
Okay, fair enough. Animal desires, he says, are irrational desires. So we can't explain them through reason. They don't, necessarily make sense. We can't unpack them. They're instinctive. So things like hunger or sexual urges or that kind of thing. They can be quite irritating at times. And yeah, just to reiterate that human thoughts, the rational capacity, means that we can overpower these animal desires.
So for example, me keeping myself in and not, addressing directly or physically some of the audience members that might be sleeping or might be chit-chattering would be a form of, in your case, controlling my animal desires.
Yeah, I guess so, and you can even see it more extremely. So like human rights activists, right? They put themselves in physical danger. It's kind of counterintuitive to surviving if you're willing to put yourself in danger for the sake of ideas, for the sake of ideals. So that's kind of a really important illustration of what humans are like. You don't kind of see dogs campaigning for dog rights or whatever. It's humans. So.
But so then if you're saying that our form of human dignity depends on our employment of reason, right, and controlling our animal desires, then what kind of argument would you propose for, say, me not making any compromise, not spending any time on say, eating or engaging in sensual relationships?
Yeah, fair. I think you need to slow down there for a sec, actually, Lucas, because we haven't established the ability, what the exact term is for the ability to do this, to campaign for animal rights and stuff. So the ability Kant calls this ability autonomy. So just being in control of yourself. So unless humans recognize each other's dignity, they treat each other just like all other animals. So if you're human, for example, and someone offered you 10 trillion euros, some massive kind of sum of money, on the condition that you became their slave for the rest of your life, it doesn't really actually make sense to take up on that offer, because when you think about it, you're just reducing yourself to a machine of your owner. You're losing what it is to be human in that sense. You're trading something priceless for something with a price, even if it's a really expensive price. So you cease to have autonomy. And yeah, that kind of establishes that it's this ability, this autonomy, that is essential to what humans are, and is the ground of the dignity of the human. So that kind of term, the dignity of the human, is key to understanding what we are.
So say after this, right, after one of our workshops, and we get to tea time, and I go around this room and I speak to some of the people here, and they appear non-critical, and they seem not to, it's a short time span, let's say, as an analogy's sake, that they don't seem to employ reason, then would I, in your sense, would there be an argument in me saying that in this room there might be a lot of non-human people, or I could say that some people in this very room are non-human?
Yeah, I think so. That applies to everyone, even the most well-educated person or most learned person in the world, I'd say. If that person is just interacting with people without respecting their dignity, then even they're kind of degrading themselves, because they're giving themselves over to this idea of just trading prices, as opposed to respecting that priceless thing, that human dignity. So you can kind of think of it humans, this kind of idea we have of humans, instead it's just, we're kind of like hairless chimpanzees who know how to use mobile phones or make references to popular culture, that kind of thing. We're stripped of this dignity. That's the importance of the term.
That's quite complicated, because where would you say, for example, put the severely mentally handicapped in this case? Would you then say that they're non-human?
Yeah, so it gets a bit tricky there. You kind of have to think, well, the severely handicapped, this definition doesn't apply, strictly speaking, to the mentally handicapped, because the scope of what Kant is defining as human, he's also writing in the 18th century, so mentally handicapped people weren't, particularly well treated back then. But you can kind of say, you can still save the argument by saying he's defining it to people with a rational capacity. So, if someone doesn't have that rational capacity, it doesn't make sense to kind of criticize them for not having that rational capacity. It's kind of simpler if we think about it as saying, if you think of Paralympians or athletes who are physically disabled, they don't compete with Olympians or people who aren't physically disabled, because it doesn't make sense to pit someone with clearly less capability with someone who has clearly more capability. There's no point in putting them together in the same race. to run the same race. So it kind of sounds controversial, I guess, but we can also just say that it's not really. We're just kind of sorting out the terminology here. What we're saying is that, just because one footballer is kind of happens to be more physically capable of playing football than another footballer, we're just, in a sense, we're just pointing that out. And also maybe it's important to say that the significance of this is that if we take the United States to be representative of diagnoses, or diagnosi, they say that 4% of adults have kind of a serious mental disability. Of course, that's a significant number, but that also means that there's 96% of people who we can kind of say this argument applies to. So it is very relevant, and I'd say to pretty much everyone here today, it's relevant to kind of consider ourselves as people, or as, beings with a rational capacity.
But I mean, that other 4%, regardless of their mental capability, they're people's brothers, people's sisters, they're, in some cases, even fathers and sons. How could you then exclude them from the group from which they're literally born and kin to?
I mean, that kind of, we're putting a lot of importance on physical form there, I think. But physical form is like a kind of incidental property. It's not really an essential property to being human, I think you can say. Because we can imagine someone like Stephen Hawking, right? He is a severe physical disability, but he's still mentally very capable. He's still autonomous. He still has human dignity. But we could also say, we could think of, just imagine, the kind of ideal human, ideal physical human form, kind of like Lucas, right? It's conceivable that we would alter his brain in some kind of way so that he would spend the rest of his life like acting as a cow. In that case, he's not going to, he's going to have this, beautiful, physique, right? But he's not going to be able to have autonomy. He's not going to be able to think for himself. So, it seems like in that case, Stephen Hawking is clearly more of a rational creature, more of a dignified creature than Lucas would be.
But so, right, if what you're saying is that we should expect, with regards to the capacity that an organism has, right? We should expect that, we should be relative in what we expect with regards to what they're capable of, right? Then wouldn't you in your argument also have to include animals, that you're being a form of a species, right? So let's for example take doing experiments, say for cologne or for new medicine on animals, right? This is practically done on a daily basis. But if we were to take, for example, and let me get the picture up, right? Let's say that we take this animal and we take him into a room and we're going to dissect him. Sometimes it's done even whilst they're still alive, right? I think there's room to argue that when you would compare, let's say, an old dog or a mature dolphin to a small child, that the dog and the dolphin might be cognitively more able than a recently born child, right? I think you could argue that they're more capable of feeling pain, and they're more capable of judging the situation in which they're put, that being, the old dog over the small baby. So then in choosing with regards to the capability and what we subject people to, right? Wouldn't you then also have to include animals and within the moral, like the hierarchy that you're imposing, right? They should be included equally, because we don't see dogs as being handicapped, because that's in their nature for them not to be as cognitively able as a fully grown human. With regards to a child, surely a mature dog is more cognitively able. And why would this be important, say, right? Why is it important for us to make these types of definition? And I think it can be expected that these definitions that Lochlann is making are quite cutting and they're quite exclusive. But if you think about it, there are people in daily life who are oppressed and who can't fulfill their potential, not due to their inherent restrictions that they have, like a dog, say for example. But if we imagine a very poor person, right, who has to work on a daily basis and ensure simply their survival and have no room or time to even think about problems that might be more important. They have to spend all their time on surviving to them, right? They're being oppressed, and their capacity and their fulfillment, like their potential, is not being fulfilled. They can't be humanly dignified, like you said yourself. And so in order for us to include these people and to dignify them, like we said before, not see them as means or ends, we would need to act as a we. And it's important for us here to stress that philosophy is often seen as some form of like a luxury that we in this room can take part in and have time to engage in. But I think that's only as a result of the gross inequality that's going on in the world right now. But I think that means that philosophy equally becomes a necessity for us to engage in. If we can have right now a show of hands of who thinks they could tackle a problem like global warming single-handedly on their own. That's very impressive, right? Then we have the problem solved for ourselves right there. If that were, and I encourage you, but I think you would even agree that if you would have to do this in a vacuum without anybody else around you, that would be significantly harder than, say, if you could use all the brain power in this room in order to help you out, right? And here's where it becomes relevant for us to act as a we, and that we then stop seeing philosophy as a luxury because we would be doing something about the gross inequality that's going on in the world. And in us being a we also have to look at the perspective that we as a collective humanity of interacting individuals through forms of government, through economic policies, right? Could we then even pose the questions, are we seeing the people who are put in sweatshops and who have to survive on a daily basis? Are we seeing them any different from the view of our government as a collective we? Are we seeing them any different than animals that we put in a farm? Do we see them as anything else but a means for us to get cheaper shoes, get cheaper coffee, and get cheaper products? I think there would even be room to argue that perhaps as an individual you don't feel that way about those people, but it doesn't seem like our daily actions reflect us seeing those people as sincere means, or as sincere ends in themselves. We're simply seeing them as machines for protests, right? For us to have to spend less money on the things that we enjoy. And so in order to solve that inequality and make sure that philosophy does not become a luxury anymore, but a necessity to do those types of things, we would need to act as a we. And that's where it's important to realize why the argument of the animals is relevant in this case, because we have to not only look at natural capacities that people have and how they're restricted, but also how in a means of material poverty you're being restricted and you're not being allowed to fulfill your potential. You can't think for yourself as much as you can. And it's also important to realize that that doesn't only apply to the very poor and the people who need to survive on a daily basis. This could equally be the case for someone who has all the things they could wish for in the world, but simply choose their time to watch videos the whole day and not engage critically with the people around them, right? Simply relegating themselves to an individual. And in some cases, if you're not engaging critically or reasonably with the world around you, you're simply consuming all the time. To an extent, that would be a form of mental restriction as well for yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's, a very valid response to what Lucas and I are saying right now is like, well, okay, fair enough, but how the hell do we kind of start to solve this? And there's one kind of person in particular, I think, who does a really impressive job in kind of trying to answer that question, and that's a educationalist, I think a philosopher as well, called Paulo Freire, who he just elaborates on this idea of like, oppression isn't something material. Oppression is something, of course, as Lucas said, that can happen through material kind of deprivation. It makes sense if there isn't a school, you can't go and get educated. But it's more this idea of conscious oppression, of being dominated by other people, and then this, this conscious oppression. It's like an internal oppression, because if you're not able to think for yourself, you're never going to be able to liberate yourself. And he has it's kind of too much of an issue to go into now, but he has this method of dialogical emancipation, those two kind of big words. Basically what he's saying is, in order to free people, you don't just give them loads of stuff. You don't give people who are hungry more food, or people who need vaccines. What you do is you engage with them, you talk with them, and you engage with their human dignity, because otherwise you're just to just kind of solve the problem materially is to kind of continue the systems of oppression, in the first place. So there are kind of pretty good, attempts at trying to solve the situation.
But I think it's, for emphasis' sake, I think it's noteworthy to mention that the definition that we're proposing here is not one to value people less who are disabled or who may be oppressed. On the other side, it's especially more of an argument to do something about those people who are either naturally restricted, and that doesn't mean that you should treat them any different, right? Through the moral argument that we presented, and in the same way, those people who may be materially and mentally oppressed, it provides you with even more of an argument to do something about those types of situations.
Yeah, a duty or an obligation even to do that. So I guess we kind of threw around a lot of jargon which we tried to define well, but I think more importantly maybe is the kind of image we leave you guys with, to kind of just leave you with this lasting idea of this duty to critical thinking and to philosophy, because otherwise, hopefully we've demonstrated, if you're not embracing your dignity, your rational capacity, you're essentially not being human. There's not really that much apart from kind of fancier clothes or wearing clothes at all that kind of distinguishes you from animals.
So we would like to close with a perhaps a more lighthearted but all the more relevant analogy to this, and we chose the analogy of a train, in a sense. And so what we are doing currently, to lead back to the question, as a collective, right? Which may in the end reflect what we are, right? What we are doing currently as a collective is sitting at a train without really knowing where it's heading, right? We don't know who's driving the train. We don't do an effort to find out who the conductor is.
Yeah, and as we're on this train, we're sitting in this train, pretty comfortable seats. There's a window, of course, beside us. And the train rushes past all these sights we see. To follow up on them, right? In 10 seconds, they're already like a kilometer behind us. To follow up on them, to kind of get out of our seats, to try and find the train driver or question the conductor. It seems like a lot of bother compared to just like taking a nap or playing cards or listening to music. But of course, no matter how we react to this, if we're still comfortable in our seats, these sights keep on continuing outside of the window. Yeah. And of course, there's other people in the train with us, sitting in the booth kind of opposite us and beside us. But currently what we're doing is we're not interacting with them. We're taking a nap or we're listening to music. Even more so what we're doing in not responding to the sights we see outside of the window, we're pulling the curtains across the window. We're kind of obstructing what we see completely from our little reality, so that we don't have to look outside anymore, because some of the sights we see are very troubling. What we see are we see slaves maybe working in the fields, or we see a man beating his wife. These are pretty troubling things. So we kind of want to, if we're seeing them at a constant rate outside of this window, what we're doing is we're pulling the curtain across, so we don't have to address these things immediately. And moreover, there might, just to reiterate this point, there might be a dog or a mentally kind of handicapped person also in the train with us, but just because they don't realize the significance of what they're seeing, of say these scenes of oppression outside the window, that doesn't mean we criticize them for not being able to understand that. We just kind of acknowledge that's the limit of their rational capacity. But of course what we do, if we know that someone is rationally capable of understanding what they see outside the windows, what we should do is recognize that they are seeing the same things that we're seeing. So then kind of just, this is the real thrust of what we're saying. To decide not to find the train driver, right? It's to willfully inflict ignorance upon ourselves. We're altering the reality around us to our liking and to our comfort simply because we can. It's easy to pull the curtain across and ignore what's outside. If we're doing that, if we're pulling the curtain across, we might as well just constantly inject mind-altering drugs into our bodies, as ultimately the same outcome occurs. That outcome is that there's a more favourable happier perception of reality than we would have if we didn't alter our minds. For when we cover the windows with the curtains, we plunge ourselves into darkness, and we're forced to rely on artificial light and kind of a depersonalization of the interaction we have with other people. If you can't see the people around you clearly, you're going to kind of talk more generally. You're going to talk with less respect to each individual's identity. Yeah, but like, of course, if we're closing the curtain and we're in almost complete darkness and we're not seeing what's outside of us, you know, we might as well not be in a train. We could be anywhere, you know. Why be on a train if all you want to do is kind of, you know, sit in darkness and nap, as nice as napping is. This doesn't change the fact that we are on a train. Even if we put the curtains across the window, we're still on a train, and we have been exposed to these troubling sights outside of the window. Again, closing the curtain doesn't change the fact that we saw these scenes of oppression, scenes of slavery outside the window. When we pull the curtains over, or we refuse to ask for details about the journey, we're ignoring the incontrovertible facts, the undeniable facts of our being as humans, as people with a rational capacity. We're denying the fact of what we are, basically.